This is Capitalize Your Finances, the show representing you, a select group of excited, ready, and fired up listeners seeking to potentially maximize your money moves and get after it. We don't settle for generic advice of always and nevers. Our currency is our intellect, and we constantly seek the logical way of likely creating advantages to potentially maximize wealth for our personal and unique situations. The show brings you this step-by-step framework to capitalize your finances in the aspects of your financial situation, and we strive to explore strategies and ideas to potentially help you capitalize on your financial decisions. We are capitalizers, and this is our show.
Welcome back to Capitalize Your Finances. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Paniotu, the Cap in Capitalize. And today, we have a successful, ragingly successful restaurant franchise owner of Dark Side of the Spoon Hospitality Group out of Iowa, Mr. Tom Baldwin. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. And I am super excited to talk to you about how you've capitalized your success in finances with Dark Side of the Spoon. But before we dive into the professional side of things, give our listeners just a brief background of who you are, the man, the myth, the legend behind the professionalism.
Well, let's see. I am a former student at the University of Iowa, making me a Hawkeye. I did not finish college. I left in my junior year to work at Domino's Pizza. I was always a worker. I've worked since I was 12 years old, from bussing tables at International House of Pancakes to mixing paint at Sears. I went to college. I had a roommate that worked at Domino's Pizza and was an assistant manager there. He told me that if I would become a manager of a Domino's Pizza within a year, I could own my own Domino's Pizza franchise. And that kind of sounded appealing since I had this work background and school. I wouldn't say it wasn't challenging. It certainly challenged me, but I was more into working than I was into school. And so I took a summer off. I came back. I decided to leave school and figure this out. So I became a pizza delivery driver at Domino's Pizza. A month later, I was an assistant manager. 3 months later, I was a manager. And a year later, I was told that if I wanted to franchise a store, I would be in BFE with making $30,000 or $40,000 a year, probably with no real opportunity to get big because all the good locations were already taken. So I tooled around again, as a manager for a while and started planning my own rise to wealth and fame, and went back to Des Moines, Iowa from Iowa City, and started my own pizza delivery chain called Home Run Pizza, later changed the name to Home Team, and built that up to 13 stores, of which I franchised stores and owned corporate stores, and did that. So then in 1999, which was after 12 years, I sold that, got out of the pizza business, made a few dollars, took a little bit of time off, worked at a Blockbuster for about 4 months, stocking shelves just to relax and de-stress, and coming off of that, which was kind of fun, but also a waste of time. And I mean, look at where they're at today. I think I ran them out of business. So my future wife, who I'd met at the pizza place, decided that she knew some people in the bar business that did well, and she found a really good location of a bar that was for sale. We bought it and remodeled it, opened up a big nightclub, and then that kind of put us on our pathway to where we are today.
Awesome. Well, and going back a little bit, because and thank you for telling us a little bit of the background of the story. So you leave college. It's not for you. You get into Domino's. So was Domino's the first experience that you had with hospitality? Like, was that the moment that you said, okay, this is going to be where I'm going to commit my lifelong pursuit to becoming successful?
Well, certainly when I was working as a busboy and dishwasher at the International House of Pancakes, that got me into the service industry business. Since that time, I'd worked a lot of retail at malls, sales jobs, stocking jobs at clothing stores at the mall. I was that guy that kind of just grew up doing mall jobs, so to speak. But it wasn't until Domino's Pizza where I found kind of a model, a pathway that I could see transforming from working to owning and to making real money. And because at Domino's, when I was a manager, I had access to profit and loss statements because you would get a bonus based on your profit. And so we had controllable costs. So I learned about how to control labor costs. I learned about how to control food costs, what fixed costs were. We learned in college the difference between fixed costs and variable costs in running a business, and how to do a break even and how to maximize your profit. But Domino's really put that into reality, put it into perspective. And so I had a working model that I was in charge of. And the only thing I lacked was, my own product. And, I just had to come up with, a formula, a recipe for a good pizza, a marketing, a branding campaign, and, a lot of risk, I suppose. It wasn't free. We had to convince people to invest in us, and I had to convince myself into taking risks.
Well, in speaking of risks, so when you and your wife started off on your first go around, and you kind of answered this a little bit with a restaurant or a bar, I was going to ask if you had a game plan, but it kind of sounds like it was built in because Domino's gave you this huge head start on the framework of running a business or an enterprise. So when you decided to go off of that path and start marketing and branding and doing your own thing, that sounds like it was pretty intricate. Like, was it pretty well thought out at that point? You kind of knew, all right, I'm going to be able to repeat this process just like I did at Domino's?
It was, to an extent. I had just been talking big around fellow employees or other people, friends. There was another manager or two at other locations at Domino's in our area. And we all kind of grouped together and said, we're going to do this one day. And it was a lot of bravado. But most of us had learned the pathway from Domino's, and it was just up to, and many people before me had done the same thing, and many people had talked the same thing and hadn't done it. So it did require a lot of personal, momentum and balls, so to speak. I don't know if I can use that on your Christian station.
You can use it. We all know what you mean.
But you actually thrust yourself in this. It's like jumping off a high dive in a pool sometime. It looks easy, it looks fun, but when you're actually, or driving out skydiving, when you're actually looking out of that plane and it's time to jump, it gets kind of scary. Mm-hmm. And not only there's a money risk, but there's just an anxiety about it. And so I figured I had to just jump ahead and not think too clearly, other than to come up with a name, a logo, and put it in action. And I opened up the first store, with one other gentleman that had come from Domino's. He didn't survive very long with me. We kind of butted heads as partners, but we just jumped in and didn't look back, really. Just an old fashioned jump in and don't pay yourself until you make money.
Well, and so speaking of paying yourself, how long did it take for you to become profitable with your first enterprise?
So it was a 50-50 venture with another gentleman. We had some personal guarantees. We we applied for an SBA loan for $25,000. We applied for an equipment lease where we were paying, I don't know, 27% interest if you extrapolated, but it wasn't called interest at this leasing company, for, another 30 something thousand or 40 something $1,000. And then there was $5,000 that I borrowed from my girlfriend at the time, and $5,000 that this gentleman brought in from his parents. And then additional loans of 12.5 each that were co-signed by our respective parents. So it was a lot of debt. And of course, my desire was to pay everything off as quickly as possible because I didn't want debt and I didn't want to be beholden to anybody. And so that's, and that was part of this, what sparked the argument I had with my partner, which led to him going his separate ways.
Got it.
And so to answer your question, I don't think we made a profit until the second year, but we paid down all the debt pretty quickly.
So that's interesting from a profitability standpoint, because in theory you could have been profitable sooner, but you just wanted that debt gone just because.
Well, sorry.
No, it's okay.
There's a difference between profitable and cash profitable, I guess, so to speak. So on paper, we probably, when you took into consider the depreciation that, you learn about when you first go into business, and accountants do all that stuff for you. I always have, and I still to this day, probably against a lot of people's advice, look at cash flow from month to month, and that's how I judge how my, the health of my business. For the most part, I still listen to some experts, but we were not cash rich until the second year, and cash rich was having, $20,000 or $30,000 in the bank at that point.
Sure.
Because every moment that we could pay down debt, I would pay down debt, leaving what I thought was a proper amount of operating capital in the account for bad times.
Sure. Well, in speaking of bad times and mistakes, with this first venture, what were some of those biggest mistakes that you made?
The first biggest mistake was taking on that partner. It gave me a lot of mental confidence and security to take him on and to share this bold, in our minds, this bold move of leaving and opening up our own place. But really, it just set me up for potential future problems. For instance, he didn't go quietly. He wanted what he perceived as some gains from the store. He didn't want what his initial investment was. He wanted more than that because it seemed to be on a good path. I thought differently. I thought, well, he's the pain in the butt. I'm doing all the work and I'm making the decisions that make us money, and we haven't really made money. So I don't think he should get any. So that kind of tied me up with a lot of unnecessary angst. And in the long run, he really wasn't asking for a lot more. It was kind of a problem on my side for just being too narrow-minded, because it would have been a lot easier for me to let go of that and just give it to him and move on and not stress about it. So that was, kind of the problem. And then after that, it all came down to employees and future franchisees or partners that were made by mistake. I still have issues with finding perfect people. But whenever you make a bad choice of management, it usually comes back to haunt you. And it's a business, the restaurant business, where it's not easy necessarily to find perfectly matched people for positions.
Sure. Well, and on the flip side, so clearly you came out on the other side profitable because you're here today. So what was that moment in your first venture where you went from barely making it Okay. So after the 2 years, to really turning it into the business and allowing that restaurant to work for you?
Well, let's see. I think it was probably just a couple months after the partner exited, and we were deep into the winter / spring, and we were at a college adjacent to a small college called Drake University, and the weather wasn't perfect. And one night, the phones just kept ringing. It's a delivery business mostly, and things were just ringing off the hook. And we had record sales, and everything seemed to be going well. Our deliveries were on time. We were just crushing it, so to speak. And at the end of the night, we had the great sales, we had the great labor, and even though it was tough times, we rose to the occasional. And I sat back and said, this is, the apprehension of having this guy leave. I wanted him to leave, but I was nervous about it. It just kind of was a good time where I just sat back and said, this is it. I need to do more of this.
Yeah. Well, and it's something to really hit on, because the majority of business owners in general, but especially in the restaurant world, they either don't make it, or once they do make it, they build up their baby and they call it good and ride off into the sunset. Well, you and Annie decided to keep going. So for you, what were the decisions that were made after your first restaurant was just crushing it to turn that corner and then reinvest it into the next venture and the next and the next?
Okay, well, to be clear, I did not meet Annie until the final days of this pizza venture, about 11 years later, 10 years later. So
that's right.
This was me with my girlfriend at the time, who was somebody different.
Got it.
So, and she participated, the girlfriend participated in the business quite a bit.
Yep.
But she did not participate in the management or the ownership side. She, she filled a role, doing other things within the business. So the decisions, the risk, the decisions were all mine. And that's not to take credit or pat myself on the back. It's just to kind of give you a framework for the situation.
Yep. Yeah. So with that, like, once you started reinvesting into the next one and the next one, like what decisions did you make to not only keep doing it, but to continuously be successful?
So, it wasn't easy, but after that first store had been so successful, we decided, what's the next thing? Well, you got to open a second location. You can only do so much out of this one. And so then I started mapping out the metropolitan area of Des Moines and throwing a couple more, push pins in the map, so to speak. And we opened a second location, and my attorney at the time had a brother who was a year older than me and was looking for a job. He was recommended to me by the attorney, and he wanted to become a partner in the business. So I said, well, it's a perfect guy to run this second store, and let's see how this works out. So he put in half the money, and we opened up a second store, because I didn't learn my lesson the first time with partner. And so we tried, we opened one together that was moderately successful. And then that led to a third store with, of all people, my original partner, who we had, the situation where we separated that didn't go great. By then, some time had healed the wounds, and we still had a mutual respect for each other's pizza making and pizza shop running business.
Sure.
That we opened one with him as a partnership out there. So I had two partners, one in each of these second and third locations within a few short months of each other. about 2 years down the road from the first opening.
I'm just more curious than anything. So like for example, Starbucks builds these stores in these cafes, and it's the convenience factor. And so you see these Starbucks literally across the street from each other, and it does not affect profitability at all. So for you, when you were mapping out Des Moines in trying to have the location set up, was that ever taken into consideration as far as the profitability side of things? Were you nervous that profitability was maybe going to be taking away from the other, or did that even cross your mind?
Oh, it certainly did. Like I said, we were a delivery business. It's probably 95% of the business. There was no eat in. It was like a Domino's pizza. You either picked up the pizza, which about 5% of the customers did, or it was delivered.
Sure.
It's not a fast casual. It's not a restaurant. And so you have a delivery area. We had at Domino's at the time had a 30 minutes or $3 off guarantee. If you remember that, I'm not sure, but
oh yeah,
we had a 30 minutes or free, which Domino's had started off with. And so we had to design areas that were within a certain geographic area, and we couldn't overlap. So there was a lot of negotiations between the stores, so to speak, especially since they were owned by different entities, of where the area started and stopped, and how to make sure that it was directed to the right store and the stores didn't poach from each other. So there was a little ambiguity, but we settled on a distance, and because it certainly would have poached into the profits, like you speak.
Sure. Well, and we've been talking about up until this point, the good vibes, the success, the fun stuff, and any business, especially hospitality, there are inevitable low points. And so one of my questions I had for you, what was one of the darkest points that you went through with like the Dark Side of the Spoon Hospitality Group, and what did you do to get out of that?
Well, if we're still talking about the pizza business, that was pre Dark Side of the Spoon, to be clear.
Yep.
Dark Side of the Spoon has just come into the light about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, as we felt a need to form a hospitality company. We just kind of acted as a family. But back then, when it was just pizza, we didn't have a lot. The dark side, I guess, as dark as it got, was when we opened, the fourth or fifth stores, and they weren't profitable or as profitable, or they actually lost money. Those were, those make you second guess yourself. They make you think, how do you adjust? Do you sell them? Do you get out of them? Do you file for bankruptcy, if this continues? So along with the risk, I was seeing some of the bad sides of running a business. Luckily, it wasn't the first one, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking. But then you start thinking, is this because I'm not in there running this business, and this person is as good as me? Is this person not trying as hard as me? How do I make this situation work? And so I then thought, I will sell this. I will find somebody to operate this store that really cares. I'll sell it to them. Then I found out I could do a license agreement with these first two stores with these partners, but it was too many now. I had to do a franchise. So then I was told it'd be, $50,000 or $60,000. And at the time in the 80s with the pizza money, it's not like I had that laying around to go through the franchising. So that seemed like a dark side. But we pushed through it, and we were able to sell, get franchise and sell franchises. And then, I just had an inner circle of people that worked for me. I didn't have a big staff to try to find franchisees at the time. And so we were basically selling to our employees. and some of them were capitalized, some of them were undercapitalized. And so it just, there was a few years there where it was just kind of, we didn't know where we were at. We just knew that the stores I was running, were doing close to what we were expecting. And these other stores that we had sold were doing well and not paying their fees, or weren't doing well and weren't paying their fees. It became it became very stressful on the heart and on the mind, where I'd wished I hadn't even done that or grown that fast, or I had found, I wished I had found a better way to duplicate corporate stores in different locations and not tried to carve up Des Moines into so many markets, and maybe gone to bigger cities and had done what I'd done with the first couple stores. And, I knew I couldn't do it myself because I wasn't going to be in 4 places at once trying to run them. So it just, I knew the formula was right. I just had to find the right people, and more often than not, I wasn't able to. And so that was very discouraging. And I let that go on for years and years until I finally just had enough of it and sold it.
Yeah. Well, and how much time did you take between the pizza franchises and then actually getting into the dark side of the spoon hospitality group?
So I started the pizza places in 1987, and in 1999 I sold them. I sold them for a contract sale of about 80% down and 20% that was supposed to be paid over the next couple of years,
yep.
Of which none of that was paid. And then I had met my wife, and we had thought about doing going into the nightclub or bar business, but there was some time where we didn't have that opportunity, and so that's when I worked at the Blockbuster. And then finally we found, and I didn't do that because I needed the money. I did that just for the de-stress because it was such a fun job. And then we found a location that had been a successful bar but was no longer. And we negotiated a price and we bought it. And we remodeled it, closed it down for a couple months and remodeled it and opened it up later in 99. And it was the number one nightclub in Des Moines, Iowa for the next 2 years. And it did really well. We still weren't a hospitality company. We didn't really become a hospitality company until maybe 2017 or 2018. So another 17, 18 years. We just started acquiring, once off the success for that, we started a new bar with a different concept. And then we bought a bar. And then over the next few years, we'd go a couple years without doing anything new. Then we added one, or then we added two, or then we sold one. And we slowly over the next 10 or 15 years kind of just tried different concepts in different places. And most of them were successful, but not all of them. We had a couple, 3 that just were terrible. And some that that had done great and then kind of leveled off. Some we sold, some we bought that were existing that we just liked and that provided more of a, I don't know, maybe you'd call it a passive income because we didn't have to work it that often. We just kind of had to guide it.
Yeah.
And then, we probably had 7 or 8 different concepts by the time we were into 2012 or 2013. And then we started duplicating a couple of concepts that seemed to work pretty well. But I just always come up with new concepts because I get bored of duplicating the same old stuff. And I learned from the pizza place that I didn't think I really wanted to do that. But the problem with that is it's hard to have economies of scale and spread your costs where, you can do it to some extent because it's still the same food and beverage business. But when the concepts are different and you have different plans,
mm-hmm.
it raises a lot more problems than it should. So if I was really smart and had to do it all over again, I probably would have picked one concept like I did with the pizza business and duplicated it, but I also wanted to stay in the same market. So that required me to do different concepts. So I'm just never happy. It's kind of a catch-22. And now I'm trying to experiment with 2 or 3 concepts and taking them, out of town, so to speak.
Sure. Well, and so since you've started when it comes to like the pizza stores as well as the bars, so how many stores, bars, restaurants, just totaling that up, have you actually then gone in and taken over and ran and started from scratch, if you could think about it?
Well, I'd have to say there's been over 40, if we're talking about locations, including the pizza companies early on. So once you get past the pizzas and you start in the bar life of me and restaurant life of me, we're probably in the high 20s. We're definitely in the 30s, but because some of them have been sold or have gone out of business. Currently, I think we have 27 that we either own or we are partners in with other people. And in most cases, we operate.
So for you, in coming back to the financial side, because this is a financial show, of course, I do know that you happen to have a child at TCU, because we text basically every weekend.
Frogs.
Go Frogs! Hey, they're still undefeated.
As of the taping of this show,
they are undefeated. Yes.
No.
Okay. Now, with that and children and, when we met in Coeur d'Alene and all that, those are some expensive things. So obviously you've had some awesome success. And so with that, as you turn the corner on your first restaurant and another and in ventures, what have you done to make sure that you can continue to capitalize on your finances to the fullest?
Well, I guess if you're talking about the finance side, I've been operating for the last 10 years, kind of an unwritten formula. I keep, maybe I'm answering your question correctly, maybe I'm not, but each one of our locations and concepts in itself are separate entities. Yep. And whether they're owned by us or by other people. And most of them are under this umbrella called Dark Side of the Spoon, which is I think it's an LLC. And there's tax reasons to do the things the way we do things, advised by our attorneys and our accountants. But we treat each entity, separately on their own. We try to build up a reserve balance of money, and I probably keep too much in there. I probably need to kind of conglomerize it. That's a word.
It is now.
Into one big deal and maximize my money drawing interest or something in this crazy world. I don't know if you can do that anymore. But, I try to keep a balance in each one, and then we take the difference on a monthly basis as part of a distribution, as well as our small and meager salaries, and use that money that we take to invest. So we pay debt down where it should be. We invest personally in stocks and mutual funds on our own accounts. We also put it with financial advisors. We've acquired real estate over the, not only our own home and a couple of other investment homes, but we also have commercial real estate, some of which we occupy for our businesses and some we don't, that we rent to other people. And so we try to kind of to do a little bit of everything and have a nice portfolio, so to speak. And that's just been, when we can. And so we try to grow every year in our net worth. It's been tough this year, just for inflationary reasons and how the stock market has performed. But at the same time, we've taken on 5 new locations this year too, which was something I didn't anticipate happening in this tough times. But, so far this year may be a year where we go backwards a little bit or level off, but so far, for the last 10 years or so, we've been able to grow our net worth, uh, incrementally each year and do it in a diverse way. So if we have tough times in this situation or that situation, not all hope is not lost.
Sure.
You know, we probably gave up being able to maximize our situation by kind of being diverse, but with our investments. But at the same time, I'm pretty comfortable. I didn't expect I'd ever have this kind of net worth as a young child, but if I look
Yeah.
at it now, it's not enough. I got to have more.
Yeah. Well, and going back to saying how you may have too much cash in your LLCs or whatever the case may be. It's interesting because with businesses of cyclicality, such as yourself, I mean, I don't know anyone that will look and go, man, that's way too much cash. Because when times get really tough, especially in a business like yours, I'm not telling you, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it pays to be a little bit heavy on the cash, which I totally get that. So what I'm saying is I'm not judging you for it. I can't speak for all of my listeners at home, but I'm not going to judge you for it. Now, Tom, before we close out the show, I wanted to ask you, because we have a number of people that do listen to the show that want to become successful in the restaurant world, whether it's franchise, opening their own, etc. So what would be some of the best advice that you would give aspiring restaurateurs and franchise owners to capitalize on their success?
Besides, don't do it.
Besides, don't do it. You got to give us a little more than that.
Well, I guess number one, make sure you're not undercapitalized. You need to be capitalized. You need to have more than you think. You need to speak with other people in the business that are willing to talk to you and make sure they're friendly. You can go to school. You can take advice from faculty and professors and those things, but there's no substitute for talking to other successful restaurateurs, if that's the business you're talking about, and
Yep.
especially in your own market that are friendly. Maybe you even strive to be a partner with them, an operating partner to start. Maybe you strike a deal. Hey, how about I come in and I'm an operating partner and I'm able to grow to a bigger percentage, or you sponsor me, or I'm able to sponsor myself with your help opening my own one day. You at least should get that experience as an operating partner if it's available to you. There's a lot of national companies now, as I understand it, that give you that opportunity, where they give you a percentage of the profits and a nice salary to do that. That gets you. That's like my Domino's Pizza experience, where it gets you everywhere through what you need to know as an owner, without the risk of losing your ass, so to speak. But in lieu of that, if you want to, take some shortcuts, then dive in by all means once you've worked in the industry for a while. But don't come in with no experience or without experience, and don't come in, without enough money or access to money. And at least in the first one, I would try to not have that money be too leveraged with anything that you're afraid of losing.
Yeah, that is some sage advice, my friend. Now, before we let you go, because I always have to support our amazing guests, what can capitalizers do to support you, the Dark Side of the Spoon Hospitality Group? Where can they go to find you?
Well, they can go to the dark side of but darksideofthespoon.com, and that's a website that shows most of our operations. It doesn't show a few of them, but most of them, and we're always adding more. And within that, they'll list the different locations and links to their websites, if they do indeed have websites, or their social media, which I think they all have social media. And whenever you're in Des Moines, Iowa, make sure you go to one of our many locations. I forgot to mention, and I don't know if you want me to mention, but I just got back from Arizona a couple days ago, where I signed I'm going back to my roots of pizza, and I'm starting all over as a pizza franchisee for a pizza chain that's a corporate chain based out of Scottsdale, Arizona, called Grimaldi's Pizza. And they have 42 or 40 some locations, corporate locations, located from Arizona to New York City. They got their start in Brooklyn, New York. It's a New York style pizza with a coal-fired oven, and it's the best pizza I've ever had. And they are a great company with a great owner and great leadership. Owner Joey Seal and Michael Flom, who is the COO there. We visited with them several times. They came to Des Moines, and they are, I don't know that I can bring them under the umbrella of Dark Side of the Spoon for my operations, or if I have to keep that separate, but we are going to open 5 of those in the state of Iowa here over the next 3 years, in addition to everything else. So I'm excited about that.
You should be excited. Well, and you can say whatever you want about that. We go to Scottsdale regularly, and so now I'm going to force my family to snag some Grimaldi's.
There are several locations there, and please go try them out.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you, listeners, capitalizers at home, for tuning in, as always, to Capitalize Your Finances. This is Christopher A. Paniotu, your host, The Cap and Capitalize. If you have any questions about today's episode, or you have people that you want to have on the show to reveal how they have capitalized on their finances, you know the drill. You can either give me a call at 253-214-3050, or you can shoot me an email, chris@capitalizeyourfinances.com. As always, until next time, keep capitalizing.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material was gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. No client or prospective client should assume that the information presented serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from Capitalize Your Finances or from any other investment professional. Christopher Paniotu is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Capitalize Your Finances, a separate entity from LPL Financial. Tom Baldwin is not affiliated with Capitalize Your Finances or LPL Financial.